matter of the quorum, I'm going to recognize that this is an issue about which people have very deeply and sincerely held beliefs that are often in direct contradiction to other people's beliefs. I respect that. I'm asking everyone in the room to respect that and to respect the testimony of others that you may disagree with. So I want to try to approach this in a very civil and respectful manner. I will note that I expect everyone to be able to conform their conduct to that. Hopefully it won't get to this point, but if anyone's unable to do that, we'll just have to ask them to vacate the seat. No signs, demonstrations, verbal catcalls or harassment or comments. We'll have them be here to listen to testifiers, and we provide ample opportunity for people to notify us if they wish to be formally on the record with testimony. To those who have not, for whom we don't have time to have verbal testimony, we do have written testimony that many people have submitted because it's part of the official record to all the members of the committee. So with that, Senator McEwen, welcome to the Judiciary Committee. Would you describe your bill?
Thank you very much, Chair Latz. Chair Latz, members of the committee, and fellow Minnesotans, this past summer, in June 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the 1973 landmark case Roe v. Wade, eliminating the federal right to abortion. This decision was a shattering blow to the right to access abortion in the United States, leaving even more people struggling to access the essential health care they need. The overturning of Roe v. Wade made the United States a global outlier. In the last 3 decades, dozens of countries have acted to expand abortion access, but the U.S., uniquely, has gone backwards, taking away rights, contracting them rather than expanding them. But here in Minnesota, we believe that people should be free to make their own reproductive health care decisions safely and without interference from government. The importance of this issue to our people, our families, and our communities was demonstrated this past election when Minnesotans came out to elect a pro-reproductive freedom majority and sent us to the Capitol with a strong message to protect these values, to protect our reproductive rights and freedoms. In Minnesota, we are fortunate. We already have our own state version of Roe v. Wade called Doe v. Gomez, which establishes that Minnesotans have a right to abortion care under our state constitution. However, as we know from this past year's experience, court decisions are only as strong as the judges that uphold them. What happened at the federal level could happen here in Minnesota too. We shouldn't have to worry that our basic fundamental health care rights might be decimated by a future rogue court. Therefore, we must act now to ensure that our reproductive rights and freedoms are properly recognized and codified into state statute. Senate File 1, the Protect Reproductive Options Act, or PRO Act, establishes the fundamental right of Minnesotans to make individual decisions about their own reproductive health care, including contraception, pregnancy, and abortion. Under the PRO Act, reproductive health care decisions will be entrusted to patients and their doctors. The PRO Act prevents politicians from interfering with a person's fundamental right to make these personal decisions. The PRO Act is a short, simple bill that will protect Minnesotans' reproductive freedoms and codify our rights into law. So I'll just very quickly go through the subdivisions. Again, it's a very brief bill. You can pull it up on your computer to follow along if you'd like. Subdivision 1 establishes the title, Protect Reproductive Options Act. Subdivision 2 defines reproductive health care. This includes but is not limited to contraception, sterilization, preconception care, maternity care, family planning and fertility services, and counseling regarding reproductive health care. Subdivision 3 establishes the fundamental right to reproductive health care. Subdivision 4 recognizes that this fundamental right to reproductive health care is established within the Minnesota Constitution. And Subdivision 5 prohibits local units of government, cities, counties, etc., from regulating an individual's ability to exercise these fundamental rights more restrictively than is set forth in the bill. And now, Mr. Chair, with that, my comments have concluded for the moment. I do have two speakers as part of my presentation of the bill, Ms. Meira Muhammad and Jess Braverman.
Welcome both of them, please, to come forward and testify.
Turn on the mic for posterity. We'll welcome both of them to come forward to the testifier table. We are going to be alternating pro and con. So this is part of the bill presentation initially, and so you can, both of you testifiers can make your presentations now, and then we'll go to an opponent of the bill, and we're going to alternate back and forth. And we've already indicated to individuals that when we get to that point, there will be time limits on the testimony, so we can make sure that we have time for there to be committee discussion and questions and anything else the committee wants to do. So with that, which of you two are going to go first? And please make sure you introduce yourself for the record.
Hello to Chair Latz and members of the Senate Judiciary and Public Safety Committee. My name is Meira Muhammad, and I'm on the policy team for the ACLU of Minnesota. That's the American Civil Liberties Union. It's a longstanding organization devoted to preserving individual rights enshrined in our Constitution and our laws. I'm here to speak in support of the PRO Act regarding reproductive health care. This is a timely and urgent civil liberties issue dealing with bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom. The ACLU of Minnesota believes that the fundamental rights and dignity of individuals to make choices about their own bodies without interference from the government is the top issue at this moment. Autonomy and privacy are at the core of this issue. People should have the right to make private healthcare choices unobstructed and unmediated by an outside source. While the PRO Act is a good way to codify reproductive rights, we as the ACLU urge the legislature to not simply stop there. There's a long list of other legislation that needs to be repealed, seeing as they are unnecessary and unfortunate restrictions currently on our state books and our state laws. It should be noted that this is despite a district court striking down these restrictions as unconstitutional under our state constitution, yet they still exist. And that would be Repealer Bill Senate File 70. Just passing the PRO Act and not going further could potentially risk a situation where reproductive rights are codified in state law and yet cannot be meaningfully accessed by those who need it most. This is a conundrum we at the ACLU face regularly, where there's a law on the books and yet people cannot exercise it meaningfully. The ACLU Minnesota is supportive of the PRO Act and other proposals to protect and expand reproductive freedom. Thank you to the chair and members.
Thank you, Ms. Muhammad. Before we go on, I'm going to make a note. I was just informed Senate Media, which is broadcasting this hearing, is having technical difficulties. Apparently, the audio is not streaming. So it's the Senate Media staff are working on that. Unfortunately, it also means whoever's trying to watch this on streaming isn't hearing this announcement. But they're working on it. Hopefully it'll get remedied as promptly as possible. But we will go forward. This, like all hearings, is being recorded internally here, so anyone who wishes to go back and listen to the testimony will have that opportunity to do so. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jess Braverman, and I'm the Legal Director of Gender Justice. We are a legal and policy advocacy nonprofit dedicated to advancing gender equity through the law. I'm here today to share our support for SF1 and to demonstrate the immense support for protecting and expanding abortion access across Minnesota. Gender Justice is the home of Unrestrict Minnesota, a coalition of reproductive rights, health, and justice in the state. Unrestrict Minnesota is made up of healthcare clinics, abortion funds, practical support groups, advocacy groups, faith communities, and more. In 2019, we filed a lawsuit challenging abortion restrictions in the state, and last July, a judge determined these restrictions were unconstitutional and blocked their enforcement. The lifting of these restrictions had an immediate positive impact on Minnesotans seeking abortion, on providers, and on people from the upper Midwest and across the country who have lost meaningful access to reproductive care. But we should not have to go to court to protect our constitutional rights. SF1 is an important first step in protecting these rights within our law books, a right that is widely supported by Minnesotans across the state. Last month, we commissioned a poll of Minnesota voters. We found that 68% of Minnesotans specifically support the repeal of laws that restrict access to abortion. In addition to codifying the right to choose an abortion, it's equally critical that we repeal the laws that hinder a person's ability to exercise that right. Access was a clear concern for Minnesotans that were polled. A majority supported other policies that would ensure the right to abortion is made real through meaningful efforts to expand abortion access, including Medicaid funding for abortion and legal protections for providers and patients from out of state seeking abortion care in Minnesota. An attack on access to safe, legal, and essential reproductive health care sweeps through this country. We have a golden opportunity to protect our rights and advance reproductive freedom in our state. We urge you to pass SF1 and continue the vital work of making abortion care accessible to all Minnesotans. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator McEwen, does that conclude your initial bill presentation?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. So we are now going to start alternating pro and con testifiers. We have allotted 15 minutes to each side, and we're not going to reallocate any unused time from one side to the other. But if it turns out that we have extra time on one side and they wish to use that for additional testimony, that is fine. Right now, I'm going to invite Professor Teresa Collett from the University of St. Thomas School of Law to come forward and provide us with your testimony. Welcome to the committee, Professor. Appreciate you being here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to testify in opposition to House Senate File 1. Your Honors, I believe that this actually is a litigator's dream and a responsible government official's nightmare. The ambiguity in this particular bill is the sort of ambiguity that leads to complex litigation. Shortness or brevity is not always a benefit in legislation, as this committee well knows. Think of the litigation surrounding, for example, the short First Amendment to the United States Constitution. In this instance, there is no definition of many of the terms that are used, and the definitions that are provided are often incomplete and inadequate. Let me give you just 3 examples of what could occur. In fact, Planned Parenthood and other organizations throughout the country have often attacked mandatory reporting laws related to sexual abuse of minors, where the minor is below the age of 13 or 16 and becomes pregnant, obviously the product of a sexual crime. I was the Special Assistant Attorney General in the state of Kansas that assisted in defending the law that required reporting, but it was the abortion providers in that state that insisted that it was a violation of the girl's privacy. Such litigation could easily arise under this particular bill. This bill also puts into conflict its purported fundamental right, poorly defined, with our state religious liberties. The religious liberties that are textual in the Minnesota Constitution are clear and well-established and exceed those protections that we find in the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. It will be clearly anticipated that this bill, if enacted, will be an attempt to force providers of conscience to act against their conscience and provide services that they believe, in fact, ends the life of a unique, separate human being. In this instance, I would plead with you not to pass this bill. It will simply be a litigation nightmare, And the Attorney General's office will have numerous resources consumed because of the lawsuits that are seeking to undo fundamental and just laws like the law mandating reporting of sexual abuse of minors, the laws outlining solicitation of prostitution, something that has already been challenged twice in this state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Professor. And if I didn't already note it, we have informed all of the testifiers that they have a 2-minute limit. And that's to make sure that we can fit in as many people as possible who wish to testify on either side. So appreciate your testimony, Professor. We now invite Ann Jenin to come forward to the testifier table, please. Go ahead and have a seat. Identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Mr. Chair and committee members, I am here on behalf of myself as a Minnesota citizen.
Go ahead and state your name so it's for the
my
permanent
name
record.
is
Thank you.
Ann Jenin, and I'm speaking for the bill. Thank you for this opportunity to submit public testimony on SF1, the Protect Reproductive Options, or the PRO Act. I would like my testimony entered in the public record. Minnesota has been a leader in protecting the right to reproductive choice, and SF1 preserves safe and legal abortion for our women. Please continue your support for equal rights and the PRO Act without amendments. The Minnesota Supreme Court has ruled that these rights are protected. Therefore, codifying reproductive protections into the PRO Act ensures the legality of a woman's right to choose in this state. And as a woman, I've always been aware of the possibility of having an unwanted pregnancy and have been sensitive to many of my friends and family members caught in these predicaments. Rape, a failure of birth control methods, tubal pregnancies, miscarriages, or simply an unawareness of consequences of actions, especially for young adults. No one wants an abortion. It is a necessary procedure for a myriad of reasons. Government should support women's reproductive health care and not attempt to make these very personal decisions the business of the state of Minnesota. The individual should have the right to choose. And thank you very much for your time and service.
Thank you, Ms. Jenin. I will note also that the audio streaming is back on and live. So for those of you who couldn't hear me when I made the earlier announcement, there was a gap there when Senate Media had technical difficulties and the audio streaming was not occurring during the hearing. If any of you wish to go back and listen to the beginning of the hearing or any testimony up until the point at which the audio streaming returned, you are welcome to do so. This hearing was recorded, and that recording is available for anyone who wishes, any member of the public who wishes to listen to it. So we're going to proceed now with Scott Tiffany. If you would have a seat, identify your name and any organization you are here on behalf of, and go ahead and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Scott Tiffany, and I represent Love and Live More. Mother Teresa said any country that accepts abortion is not teaching its people to love, but to use violence to get what they want. The great Hubert Humphrey in his last public speech said, "The moral test of government is how that government treats those who are in the dawn of life, the children, those who are in the twilight of life, the elderly, and those who are in the shadow of life, the sick, the needy, and the handicapped. Hate evil, love good, and maintain justice in the courts. We need to love one another and stand up for injustice and the mistreatment of the weak. If not, where does this end? Does those handicapped or elderly become the next target of those who feel burdened by them living? Is life now becoming just for the luxury of those that are entitled and in power? Please consider wisely. Seek the wisdom of those who've gone before us, and there will be healing in the land. You have a choice about what happens here. Our state is the epicenter of healthcare. People come from all over the globe to be healed here. It seems to be a bit counterintuitive to be fighting so hard to end life before it even has a chance to start. Instead of trying to work on saving lives, we're now trying to end them. We're all created in the image of God. God is love and loves everyone in this room. The grieving that he has for the loss of the unborn, I know, I feel. And I just hope that you all consider wisely. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Tiffany. Our next testifier speaking in favor of the bill is Vonnie Thayer. Welcome to the committee, Ms. Thayer. Go ahead and identify yourself for the record.
Thank you. Thank you for pronouncing my name correctly, too. Mr. Chair and members, I am here today on behalf of myself, Vonnie Thayer. I'm sharing my story with you today in support of the PRO Act, SF1. Throughout my childbearing years, I experienced 3 miscarriages. Each miscarriage was unique and presented many physical and emotional challenges. The story of my very last miscarriage is the one I think demonstrates how potentially dangerous it might be for the state to get involved in making reproductive decisions. I was a mother of a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old when I began to miscarry one April morning. We lived in a rural community at the time and bundled our 2 children into the back seat of the car as we made our way to a hospital 30 minutes away. As I sat on towels in the front seat, the bleeding became so heavy that I began to wonder if I might bleed to death before we reached the hospital. My only thought was for those 2 very loved small children in the back seat and whether I would still be here to care for them. When we got to the hospital, my doctor was waiting and immediately got me into a room where the D&C could be performed and my health needs taken care of. There wasn't a moment to waste. I wonder now what would have happened to me if my doctor had needed legal permission and state paperwork completed to proceed, or what would have happened if that permission had been denied. A woman's health and reproductive rights are unique, not only to the woman, but every pregnancy she experiences. Only she and her doctor can truly understand the health and history of the woman involved. It is my belief that an individual woman's health decisions should never be put in the hands of the state. Please support SF1 without amendments to protect our reproductive rights, and thank you very much for your time and service.
Thank you, Ms. Thayer. Our next testifier is Abby Hewitt, testifying against Senate File 1. Please come on forward. Welcome to the committee. Please go ahead and state your name and then proceed with your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Abby Hewitt, and I'm here on behalf of myself. I'm 14 years old. I was born with 3 critical congenital heart defects. I was rushed into surgery when I was just 5 hours old. Doctors told my parents I only had a 40% chance of making it through surgery. This is what I looked like after my surgery. Doctors expected my recovery to take 1 to 2 months. I was in the cardiac ICU for just 12 days. The doctors told my parents that I would be small, possibly have hearing and vision problems, learning disabilities, and would not be able to play sports. I am in the 86th percentile for my height and have perfect vision and hearing. I'm a straight-A student. I love sports. I play basketball, AAU basketball, volleyball, off-season volleyball. I run the 400 meter, which we all know is the hardest track event. I pole vault. I run the 100 and 200 meter dashes. I think adults often focus on what medical doctors say and believe them to be 100% accurate. These are the things that medical doctors said about me, but here I stand, healthy and thriving. Please don't forget about people like me. In 2021, at least 183 babies just like me were aborted in Minnesota. We have the right to live. I'm not a statistic or defined by my heart defect. I am not a defect. My life verse is Psalm 139:14. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. This verse is super impactful to me because I am fearfully and wonderfully made, heart defects and all. It's a great reminder every day that I was created on purpose for a purpose. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hewitt. Appreciate you being here today. Also speaking against Senate File 1, Brenda Mann. Please come on forward. Welcome to the committee. Go ahead and please state your full name and identify any organization you're speaking on behalf of, and proceed with your
Thank you, Mr.
testimony.
Chair, members. My name is Brenda Mann. I'm a member of the Iroquois clan, Oneida Nations, First Nations people. And I am speaking on behalf of the voiceless, the unborn, the raped and trafficked women, those who became pregnant and had an abortion, and those suffering from survivor's guilt. I know from my personal experience that PTSD from my decisions to have abortions was worse than the trauma of my being trafficked. Being trafficked was not a personal choice. I was able to come to terms with that much sooner, but my guilt and my shame from my own personal choices of killing my babies was harder for me to accept and forgive myself than for it was to forgive myself from being trafficked. Survivor's guilt is very real. At the time I had the abortions, I thought I made the best decision at the time. I had no immediate regret. As time went on, though, I may not have died on the table from the hemorrhaging an abortion caused me, but I felt my soul and my mind, I felt like I had died. The shame and guilt were now magnified, and I was considering taking my own life. I had attempted suicide. I felt like I should have died in place of my aborted children. The trauma that women suffer after an abortion is deep mentally, emotionally, and psychologically. It needs to be healed. Regret may not be instantaneous. It may not show up right away, but it does manifest. And when it does, many do deeply regret this decision. I'm here at peace. I'm now at peace, and I'm here today by the mercy and grace of the loving Father. God has forgiven me from my sins through his son Jesus, who died on a cross. SF1 is extreme and is not limited to the right of self-body autonomy and the freedom of reproductive health. This is the annihilation right of babies who can survive outside the womb. For those of you who vote for SF1 and abortion and the trauma that it causes women, the blood of the innocent children is in your hands. The rest of my story is in the packet, and I thank you, Senate Committee, for hearing my testimony, and I ask that you vote against SF1. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I apologize for mispronouncing your name. I had a pronunciation here, and I thought I was going to get it right. But I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. Thank you.
All right. I am told that the audio is off again, so just so you know, we're doing the best we can here, I guess, or Senate media is. In any case, thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Also testifying against Senate File 1, Melody Olsen. Thank you. Welcome to the committee. Go ahead and state your name for the public record, and go ahead with your testimony.
All right, I'm just going to pull up my notes. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Melody Olsen, and I represent myself today. Thank you for acknowledging my fundamental right to speak with you today. I promise to be a voice and not an echo. What I'm about to share, for most of you, may be the first time you have heard a survivor's voice. They say I'm lucky to be alive. I feel like I was chosen to live. You see, my parents made the decision to enter a clinic and to allow a doctor to place a needle filled with pregnant mare's urine into my mother's womb to stop the pregnancy and extinguish my life. But as my grandmother, many years later, when she revealed this family secret, said, well, it didn't work because here you are. Yes, I survived an attempted abortion. Yes, babies survive abortions. According to the proposal in SF1, my parents would have had the fundamental right to end my life if they were doing it today. I beg to differ. You see, my life matters. It mattered 61 years ago, and it matters today. I am blessed with the fundamental right to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I believe just as I have those fundamental rights as a human being, I deserved the same protection with those fundamental rights while I was being formed and developing as the human being you see before you. The womb should be a safe place, not a death trap. Period. What else is there? Where else is there a right for a human to have the power to take another's life? Only in an abortion clinic if this bill passes. I don't know if it's called a bill. I apologize. I don't know the terminology. I'm shaking. Committee
It's called a
members.
bill, and you're doing great. So
Thank
go
you.
ahead, proceed.
I hope that when you make your final decision today regarding SF1 this weekend, I think, that you hear my voice again and you consider the fundamental rights of every life, and you choose to give our future generation their fundamental right to live by voting against this. I thank you for the honor for me to be able to speak life with you today. God bless you all.
Thank you, Ms. Olsen. We have a speaker in favor of the bill, retired Minnesota Supreme Court Justice Paul Anderson. Justice, welcome to the committee. Go ahead and state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Mr. Chair, I am Paul H. Anderson, retired Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court. I am probably one of your more unique presenters today, since I am one of 3 surviving members who authored and signed on to the opinion of Go versus Gomez. I have been had a window shot through in my house. I've been spat upon. I have been picketed. I have had any number of things. I've been called a baby killer, had 450 people kneel and pray for my soul on the grounds of the Capitol. I know how much this is an emotional issue, and it's very important for people all across the board. And it just, your heart just comes when you hear people testify. But my main message is pass this bill. It's necessary for many reasons. We all know that, and I more than any, that things can change with the composition of a court. We've seen that in Doe versus Gomez, and we've seen that in Dobbs most recently. So, well, right now, the right to an abortion, the fundamental right of a woman under the Constitution, is protected. It can go away. That's why this bill is important. There are many reasons why it's protected by the Constitution. One is privacy. That was in Roe. I believe better that the grounds would have been equal protection. I actually have had conversations with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and we agreed that equal protection was the better grounds, because under equal protection, you get to the issue of the individual rights of a woman. And that's what this is about, the rights of a woman, okay? And they need to be protected. I can give you, well, there's an Indiana case that gives you all kinds of the consequences that can have to a woman in pregnancy. Bad consequences, of course, if you have an abortion, bad consequences if you have forced birth. But I want to address another grounds that is starting to emerge and very important. Under the Constitution, that is right to freedom of religion, and the establishment of religion. Someone testified earlier that more than 2/3 of the people in the state of Minnesota believe that there should be a right to abortion. If you listen to the testimony here, so much of the anti-abortion testimony is faith-based. It is faith-based. Our country was founded on the idea that we are a secular nation, all right? There are a lot of Christians, whatever, but they understood so much of the evil in society that could result from the conflict of religious ideology. So they said, you cannot establish religion in this country. And that is what's happening under Dobbs. It is the establishment of a religious view of when life begins. It's said here that irrefutable, empirical evidence, life begins at conception. That is not true. Religious, faith-based, does the spectrum from conception to a Jewish view that the soul and the human being is there when the left shoulder emerges from the womb. Please, please, as you understand that what you are doing is following the mandate of the founders of this Constitution to prevent the establishment of religion. So, respect my views. I respect those views of others who think life begins at conception. I can't say you're wrong, but you can't say I'm wrong. We gotta respect each other's view. And I asked you to do something that a cousin of mine is, fundamental Baptist, strong anti-abortion. We get along very well. And I asked Anna, I said, Anna, you know that our view's different on abortion. Why do you treat me the way you do? Paul, you have a right to your beliefs. I have a right to mine. We need to respect each other's beliefs. So, under our Constitution, we respect others' religious views, do not want to establish religion, and I think that this bill is needed. I'm going to add one other thing.
Mr. Justice, just one other thing, and then we're going to ask you to
It
wrap
is
it up.
said
please.
that this bill is complex and convoluted and going to be hard to terminate. You guys do it all the time. You know, your bills are not always clear. I've had to wrestle with interpretation of your language and apply it. So there's nothing different about this. I can take your legislation apart piece by piece and criticize it, but that's what you do. And that's why we have division of powers. Do not reject this because somebody says that this bill is too ambiguous, too complex, because that's, as Otto von Bismarck said, Chancellor of Germany, if you like sausage and you like law, don't watch either being made. This is a good piece of legislation, and I urge you to pass it. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you for your testimony. Of course, any ambiguity in legislation was occurred because of changes made after it left the Judiciary Committee. We have one last testifier, please. Sage Benkin. I hope I pronounced that properly. Please come on forward and just state your name for the record and who you're speaking on behalf of, if any organization, and go ahead with your testimony. Thank you.
Awesome. Mr. Chair and members, my name is Sage Benkin, and I am a senior in high school, and I'm here on behalf of Pro-Life Action Ministries. 17 years ago, there was a beautiful girl named Naib Alvarez who lived in Bogota, Colombia. At age 21, Naib was found pregnant in the case of rape. As soon as she found out she was pregnant, she was faced with many decisions on whether she would keep the baby or not and the pressures of abortion. But with lots of thought and prayer, she felt that her baby should have the chance to have a joyful life with a loving family. So on July 28, 2005, she gave birth to a baby girl who she named Juliana. And although it was tough to let her baby go, she knew that it would be best for her and that her child would be brought to a new family. That young woman was me. My name is Sage Renee Juliana Benkin, and I was brought from Bogota, Colombia to Minnesota months after I was born. My family, whom I greatly love, has supported me and encouraged me to embrace my cultural traditions. And the reality of my birth mom's story has truly inspired me. Rape is so often used as an excuse for abortion. Abortion can stop the beautiful lives that God has promised all of us, and it can harm the mother mentally and physically. And not only that, but it stops the beauty of adoption from happening. Not only am I just adopted from Colombia, but I have 2 other siblings who are also adopted from the same area as well. I deserve life, and I deserve the chance to share the gospel around the world through the gifts God has given me. And I'm a person, and I am a survivor conceived of rape. I'm the loving alternative to abortion. I hope to make a change through my story, to share with people that the beauty of adoption is something that we need to look into, to share with people that adoption is a beautiful thing. I will never forget my birth mom, and will forever thank God for blessing me with her, my forever loving family, and Pro-Life Action Ministries for helping me and guiding me through this journey. I'm sharing my story because you never know how many mothers you can touch and how many lives you can save. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Benkin, and thank you, everyone who testified, for your heartfelt and, in many cases, personal stories that you shared with us. That concludes our testimony on the bill. At this time, Senator McCune, you're welcome to come back as the chief author of the bill to the testifier table. It is now 1:20. It is my intent to call for a vote before we adjourn today around 2:30. So at this point, we are going to open up the floor for discussion among members of the committee. Is there anyone who wishes to say anything from the committee membership in connection with this bill? This would also be the appropriate time, if there are any amendments to offer amendments. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And could either the author or staff explain to me the definition of individual on line 114? I thought that would be a fairly simple one, but I thought.
Senator Howe, I'm looking for some guidance either from Senator McEwen or from Counsel Primo for guidance to answer your question. So give us just a moment. Ms. Primo.
Mr. Chair and Senator Howe, individual, I believe, references a natural person as opposed to entities.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Chair Latz. So when we talk about the other thing I've got a question for, so on line 112, it talks about fertility services. Does that include surrogacy?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Senator, for the question. The bill codifies the right to make reproductive health care decisions in Minnesota, including fertility services, as you've noted. It doesn't change any laws in Minnesota or create any new laws in that regard. So this is a recognition, again, a codification of what currently the situation is in Minnesota in regard to the law in all those the items under the bill.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Senator Latz. Mr. Chair, so in that case, when you have in surrogacy where a woman donates an egg, a man donates a sperm, and it gets codified in a womb of another person, who has the individual right to that abortion?
Senator McEwen.
Senator Howard.
Senator Howe.
Whether it's abortion or to the life, where does that individual, when you talk about individual right, of all that reproductive health care and stuff, who in that arrangement, whether it's the surrogate that's carrying the baby, whether it's the woman that donated the egg or the man that donated the sperm, who is the individual on line 114 that has that individual fundamental right?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Howe. I find your question a little confusing. I think all three of those people are exercising their autonomous rights to their own reproductive health care. They're making decisions just like they would today if people were donating or if there was a surrogate. Again, the PRO Act in this regard doesn't change any laws around any surrogacy or donation of sperm or donation of ovaries. So I guess I'm not really sure what you're getting at. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, when we look at that section from 114 to 116, they say they all have an autonomous decision. Well, when we're talking about the baby's life and how that's going to, ending it or carrying it to term, who has the individual right on those three individuals? Who makes that decision?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pappas to that question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Howe, I've worked on surrogacy issues over the past few years, and we don't have a regulatory system in Minnesota right now, but there are standards of practice, and that's usually determined in the contract between the surrogate and the intended parents about how that decision-making would take place. So I don't think what Senator McEwen is doing here is really changing any of current law, what's in practice, which is it's not determined by any kind of regulatory structure that Minnesota has, but usually within a contract.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Senator Latson. I believe that I think that's making law that's going to actually basically intersect with that, and I think we'll end up in the court system to try and decide that. I think that's some of the problem, and I don't think we've given them any guidance on what the intent is in this legislation, on who the individual is, and I think that's where that's going to end up in court, and I'm frustrated that we don't actually lay that out. The other piece that I have on line 111, when we talk about, it says reproductive health care includes, but not limited to, and then it lists all those things. With the science that's going on now and the where we're going, that you can have, what they got in animal sciences now, where they got the artificial womb and they're producing animals outside the normal structure of it's gone far beyond artificial insemination. Now we've got artificial wombs, and I have to believe that that's going to carry on in today's, to actually get to us. But can you explain to me, with this list of healthcare, what do you envision is, but is not limited to? What else is there? What else are we trying to protect in the future here? I would think that we would want to maybe keep it to this limit, but because we don't know what the future is. So I'm a little concerned that we're just going to allow everything else to be added as it comes in science. Is that it? Can you explain to me, or just give me an idea, but it's not limited to, what else is out there besides what you have listed?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator. In regard to what you're describing, scientific advancements, artificial wombs, in response to that, I guess I'm going gonna say we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But again, what this bill does, the purpose of the bill is to keep us from making our own ethical, moral decisions about these areas of individuals' lives that are very personal to them, that involve their reproductive care decisions. It's taking us out of it so that Minnesotans decide on an individual autonomous basis what is best for them in terms of their reproductive health care needs. That's what the bill is establishing in our statutes.
Senator Howe.
Chair Latz. So finally, Senator McEwen, we found an agreement. I agree with you. But in that agreement, I believe we need to strike and delete but is not limited to in order to actually come back here and have the discussion about when it's time to cross that bridge and maybe add that to the legislation. So, Mr. Chair, I would like to offer the A25 and ask for a roll call.
There will be a roll call. The staff will distribute the A25 amendment to the members and make it available to the public as well. Are there 3 hands for a roll call?
Do you need 3 hands?
Seeing- Senator Limmer is requesting, well, you're identifying the parliamentary process. Thank you, Mr. Former Chairman. No request having been heard for that at this time. There will be a roll call. Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those who are not familiar with the Judiciary Committee, we get into all sorts of discussion about the nuances and individual phrases in legislation. I think Senator Howe is bringing up a valid point when he wants to focus our attention on the wording, but is not limited to, on page 1, line 11. Let's just talk about this a little bit. When we're trying to define what reproductive health care includes, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 or 7, maybe even 8 references to specific health care decisions. However, with the words "but is not limited to those 8 references," that means it can be anything added to that. Usually we're very careful about writing legislation that has ambiguous or undefined references. So I think it's a valid point when we talk about "but not limited to." If we want to write correct law for our time and place, we should make reference to the concepts we want and omit ambiguous language like "but is not limited to." We just heard a Supreme Court justice talk about how he had dealt with numerous ambiguous terms in legislation during his tenure on the Supreme Court. I think maybe we can help the court out by striking those words, as Senator Howe suggests. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To the amendment.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, I would ask you to vote no on the amendment. The list, as we have these different items that have been recognized as part of reproductive health care, it's important. And I also think that it's important to recognize that we have a view of reproductive care now that perhaps previously we didn't have. So things like contraception being part of reproductive care, abortion care being part of reproductive care, birth and carrying a pregnancy to term being part of your reproductive care and decisions. But also these other items like counseling regarding those services. I think that in some ways this is a red herring. these are fundamental conversations that we have together in community and society, deep meaning conversations. And it is important that our laws reflect the seriousness with which we approach these issues. So colleagues, I would like to keep that language in there. I think that it is important, and I ask you to vote no on the amendment.
Chair Latz.
Further discussion on the 825 amendment. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Chair Latz. And, you know, I'm disappointed that Senator McEwen doesn't agree that that language should be stricken, because I think we are, and I'm not arguing about any of the things that you listed here are part of that. But when we talk about what could come next, I think that should come before another legislative committee to have that discussion on what else you're gonna add here. I'm not arguing about any of the contraception, sterilization, preconception care, maternity care, abortion care, family care, fertilization services, and counseling regarding reproductive health care. I won't argue about any of that, but when you throw in another section of anything else that I care to throw, I have concerns that we may include stuff that this committee is not addressing and not have the foresight to look at. So I think that what we need to do is when we are looking to add something, we bring that back, had the discussion, and have a vote on those, whatever else we're gonna add to this section of new law.
Further discussion on the 825 amendment. Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, in response to your comment, Senator Howe, I'm going to give sort of a rough example. I'm not a medical doctor, right? I think most of us who make these decisions are not. Reproductive health care could include physical therapy, right? But we don't enumerate physical therapy. I haven't gone out and interviewed OBGYNs for every single possible prescription or treatment option that they suggest might be a good idea for their patients. Again, the purpose of this bill is to take us out of that discussion. The discussion happens between the healthcare provider and the individual. And the individual then, in consultation with who they want to consult, the advice, the counsel that they take, makes that decision. So it is important that we don't limit it. We don't limit that decision by taking that piece of language out of there. I can't prescribe exactly what a doctor is going to suggest a patient needs for their reproductive health care. So I ask you to vote no, colleagues.
Any further discussion on the 825 amendment? Senator Howe.
Thank you, Chair Latz. And I think the discussion here has gone to the point on trying to determine what is not limited to, that it's so broad and vague that now I'm not quite sure what we're going to be voting on in this bill, that it's like I heard Perego it's in there. So whatever comes up, it's covered. And I don't think that's good law. I don't think that is good practice. That's everything under the sun now is in this, and I have no idea where the limitations are, where the boundaries are of this bill. It's wide open. And I don't think that's a good practice of this committee, is to take down and say everything's included in here, so I have no idea what we're going to be voting on because it's all included. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Not seeing any further discussion on the 825 amendment, the clerk will call the roll.
Chair Latz?
No.
Senator Umuver-Bayton?
No.
Senator Limmer?
Yes.
Senator Carlson?
No.
Senator Eichhorn?
Aye.
Senator Howe?
Aye.
Senator Croon,
Yes.
Senator Pappas,
No.
Senator Seeberger,
No.
Senator Westland,
No.
There being 4 in favor and 6 opposed, the amendment does not prevail. Any further discussion or amendments from members of the committee?
Chairman.
Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator McEwen, as I look at this bill, the thought of when an individual has rights surfaces. Your bill on line 14, page 1, says every individual has a fundamental right to make autonomous decisions about the individual's own reproductive health. Can you tell me, when is a baby endowed with legal rights?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Limmer, for that question. I think it was said quite well earlier in some of the testimony that we heard that there are a lot of different opinions and heartfelt opinions about what the answer to your question is. But it differs. It differs. People have different beliefs about that depending upon their own religious beliefs, their own ethics, their own situation, the pregnancy that they have, their medical conditions. There's a lot of factors that come into play when people are thinking about the answer to that big question. And again, what this bill does is to entrust Minnesotans to decide those fundamental questions. It's to take politicians and the government, the state, out of that decision so that people are free. We're not going to place these limits on people that make it hard for them to access the care that they need and to make decisions that they need to make for their own health with their medical providers. That's what this bill does.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Limmer.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Senator McEwen, for that. When we write law, we try to make law that applies equally to all people. Having a kind of a blend or a blur of whatever you decide, my decisions might be different than Senator Howe's or yours. When it comes to enforcement of law, we don't always recognize that. Matter of fact, your bill recognizes the individual. In this case, let's just assume it's the mother who's carrying the child. You're giving that right of the life of the baby to someone else in this bill. There is a singular detachment from the mother and the child. And as we look at how that baby matures in the womb, science will tell us that there reaches a certain viability point where that child could survive on its own if an early birth occurred. I happen to have my oldest child was born 3 months early, and little 4-pound little girl. And that was after 2 months of bed rest that my wife had to suffer through. And yet at the same time, we're giving an entity beyond the child the right to end the life of that baby. Now, I'm all for recognizing the life of the mother in the event of consideration of abortion. But in all other circumstances, the real question comes down to, when does that baby, during its increasing viability, when does it enjoy the same rights that the mother has? And that is not recognized in your bill. And that's the ambiguity that's in our state law and in the decisions of the Supreme Court that we now have to live by. While I'm talking about the Supreme Court, I was kind of humored about the criticism of religious arguments justifying the pro-life position, but at the very same time, the justice used an example, a Levitical example, a reference to the Code of Jewish Law, recognizing birth happens when a particular appendage happens to show first. Gee, that might be a religious reference too. And so I think we really have to take a broader perspective. I think we need a broader perspective that we have to come to a point once and for all in a time when we have unlimited contraception available, unlimited people who want to adopt a little healthy child, and they'll even adopt an unhealthy child. I'm just surprised we have the whole concept of abortion that we have to discuss year after year after year in this state and country. There's so many different options available. And yet, we write pieces of legislation like this that recognizes only one party's reproductive health, but not the right to life. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Chair Latz. And I guess my comments on this bill is you know, I've had the unfortunate experience to have to deal with sex trafficking. And the last, you know, had to deal with a young woman from China who was sold into sex trafficking into Boston. And from Boston, she was sold to Chicago. From Chicago, she was sold to Minneapolis. And from Minneapolis, she was sold into a little town of 7,000 people where I had to do some contract work in my real life. And the question comes up when no one's getting notified. The question would come up if she would get pregnant during one of these events, and she goes and her handlers take her to get an abortion. There's no notification of law enforcement. There's no notification of INS. There's no notification of anyone. So they abort the baby and they put her back out on the street again. So we talk about trying to do the right thing for people. I think that this is really opening up Pandora's box, because the only way we get in to shut these down in the little town of 7,000 folks, we shut down 3 of these places. So if you don't think this is sex trafficking is in your backyard, it is. So how that intertwines with this bill is really concerning to me, that we're not notifying anyone. And they continue, and if we take this a step further of that, my other concern is if in the adoption process, I know it takes a lot of dollars to adopt someone, and if those babies come out and actually be a higher profit, now instead of a puppy mill, you've got a baby mill, where you've got a stable where you're just producing babies, because if they're worth more than the sex trafficking, now we got a whole nother mess. You know, I struggle with that, because I do believe that some notification would go a long ways to helping us interfere and interject into that sex trafficking piece. And this takes away all that notification for those young ladies that are getting trafficked. And I guess I'm not sure how to fix that. I don't know how that intertwines I think it's, I don't know how the notification piece for some of these folks intertwines with this bill. If you're going into an abortion and I suppose you don't even have to tell them your age in this bill. Everyone's got the right, so it doesn't make any difference. So there's no idea that this person has probably been, whether they're 14, 15, it probably wouldn't make any difference that they have they have supposedly a right to do that. And then as far as if they have this right to the abortion, our tax dollars, I would take it that our tax dollars, this can all be taxpayer funded, I guess also. Is that not correct, Senator McEwen?
Senator McCune.
Thank you, Chair Latz. That's not a part of this bill, any sort of taxpayer-funded health care. That's just not part of the bill. So the bill doesn't change the current situation that we have under other parts of Minnesota law.
Is there?
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Senator Latz. Is there where is that in the bill? It's just silent on it, or are we specifically saying that nothing in this bill codifies taxpayer abortions or taxpayer reproductive health or taxpayer fertility services? Is there something specific in here, or is that another piece of the assumed language? Senator McEwen.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chair Latz. So again, this bill focuses on establishing a fundamental right for people to make autonomous decisions about their individual reproductive health care. And I guess there's a lot of different things that you talked about in your comments. You were talking about the horrors of sex trafficking. You've moved on to different points, but in regard, if now you're talking about the choices that people have, whether they would decide to continue on and carry a pregnancy to term and have a child, or explore adoption options, or decide to seek abortion care. I guess I'm a little bit, but you were asking specifically about state funding, am I correct?
Senator Howe.
Well, I guess because it's gray and it's not identified in here, Senator Latz, I'd like to offer the A26 amendment.
The staff will distribute the 826 amendment.
And Senator Latz, I'd like to ask for a roll call.
Senator Howe requests a roll call. There will be a roll call.
Thank you.
And for those, if I can,
Senator
Senator
Howe.
Latz, I think that.
To the amendment.
To the amendment, as long as this is getting distributed, the idea here would be is to make it specific that nothing in this law and nothing in this section that we're being asked to vote on does not create a sense that any of this is going to be required to be paid by funds appropriated by the state.
Senator McEwen to the amendment.
Thank you, Chair Latz. Thank you, Senator. I am satisfied with the scope of the bill as it is written. I think that as I've described, several times now, what this bill does is establish a fundamental right to autonomously make your own decisions about your reproductive health care. That is what the bill does. It doesn't change anything. And what I would be concerned about is if we added something like this amendment that you're proposing, Senator, I would like us to stick with the purpose of the bill as it's written. I don't want to influence or change any of the other statutes beyond what we are working to establish here in our Minnesota statute, which is the ability to make that autonomous decision about our own reproductive health care. So I would ask colleagues to vote no on the amendment.
Senator Limmer.
Well, Senator McEwen, you just said that tax payments and other public funds are not involved in this particular bill, so why wouldn't you just recognize that in Senator Howe's amendment? I don't understand the logic of why you're being so doctrinaire in this regard when you yourself have admitted that you're not making any changes to it. So Senator Howe's amendment simply double downs on it, reinforces what you just said. I don't understand why you wouldn't accept this as a friendly amendment.
Senator McCune.
Thank you, Chair Latz. And thank you, Senator Limmer. As I said, I am satisfied with the scope of the bill as it is written. And I mean, this is a big issue. It encompasses a lot, as we've talked about today. What this bill focuses on is the establishment of that fundamental right to make those autonomous decisions. That is what it does. So I don't want to weigh in to these other areas of our statutes and create difficulty where, in fact, what we have is quite straightforward and quite direct. So my position is that I do not accept this as an amendment, and I would ask colleagues you to vote no on the amendment.
Senator Croom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regard to this amendment, you stated that you don't want to weigh into other areas of our statutes, but as I'm reading the amendment, it's specifically limited to this section. So we're just talking about this bill. We're not talking about other areas of our statutes. And so I guess, is there any other reason besides not wanting to weigh into other areas of the statutes why we couldn't adopt this amendment?
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To quote Senator Limmer, be wary of unintended consequences. And I think when we're talking about reproductive health care, we're really not just talking about abortion. We're talking about contraception. We're talking about other forms of health care, which could be a hysterectomy, or it could be other types of health care related, not a mammogram, but pap smear that could be related to normal health care. And so I would be wary also of adding this section, not knowing what kind of an impact it could have. I think it's better to vote no.
Senator Howe.
Oh, well, thank you, Senator Latz. And Senator McEwen, there was another amendment I had to deleting but not limited to, and you wanted to keep it wide open. And now when I want to just clarify this and keep it segmented so it doesn't go wide open, again, you argue, and Senator Pappas is saying, no, now we got to worry about unintended consequences. Well, just a minute ago, we have no concern about, but not limited to, unintended consequences. We're going to throw everything in. So which is it? One way we want it all in there, and the other minute we don't want to clarify, and I don't get it. Unintended consequences, I think that's what I'm trying to prevent, is unintended consequences, because when you say we have on line 121 and 122, such principles ensure the fundamental right. I'm just trying to clarify that that right does not come with the pocketbook of the state in this section. Nothing else, just this section. Thank you. I would hope you support the amendment. Thank you, Chair Latz.
Is there any further discussion on the 826 amendment? Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the good discussion. As I'm looking through my notes, I actually believe that it's possible that this subdivision, this amendment that would create the subdivision would potentially be unconstitutional under Doe v. Gomez. Anyway, there's a number of reasons. We're getting into different areas of statute. Again, the bill recognizes an individual's autonomous ability to make these decisions for themselves about their reproductive care. That is what it does. I am not wanting to delve into other areas of the law with this. I am happy with the bill as written, as drafted now, and as offered now. I would ask you colleagues to vote no.
Is there any further discussion on the 826 amendment? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Chair Latz?
No.
Senator Umu Verbatim?
No.
Senator Limmer?
Yes.
Senator Carlson?
No.
Senator Eichhorn?
Aye.
Senator Howe?
Aye.
Senator Kroon?
Yes.
Senator Pappas?
No.
Senator Seeberger?
No.
Senator Westland?
No.
There being 4 in favor and 6 opposed, the amendment does not prevail. Any further discussion or amendments? Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We previously were told, I'm going to focus on line 114, again, the definition of individual, and Senate Council told us that the definition of individual would be a natural person, I believe is what Senate Council said. I guess, is there any age in which an individual obtains this fundamental right that's contemplated in this bill?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the question. There's no specific age indicated in the bill, no.
Senator Kroon.
Mr. Chair, and so, just so I'm understanding the bill correctly, and the implications of this, obviously there's been a lot of discussion about the abortion aspect of it, but would this bill then create a fundamental right for, say, a 13-year-old to get sterilization services?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chair Latz. Senator, the bill doesn't have a specific age limit, and there are excellent reasons why people who are younger than the age of majority will seek reproductive health care and need confidentiality about that. Many of the people who do seek reproductive health care who are not the age of majority are accompanied by parents or guardians, people who they trust, who are counseling them, but some are not. And there are standards of practice well established within the medical field whereby decisions about sterilization in particular there's a process that people would go through in order to receive that type of care and for certain reasons. So
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in conclusion, the bill entrusts Minnesotans to make these decisions with their healthcare providers under the laws that we have in the state and the standards of practice that are currently in place. This bill does not change those standards of practice. This bill does not change other laws that may be in place around these issues. Again, this is really establishing that right to make those fundamental decisions without government interference in that decision.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Croom.
So I'll take it that the answer to my question is yes. And you mentioned standards of practice, but we're talking about the introduction of a fundamental right. So could that alter these standards of practice that exist?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding, Senator, is that these standards of practice are based on what medical providers are taught and determined professionally within their own purview are the best courses of action and the process by which one would offer medical advice, how that would go. This bill, again, doesn't change the way that things are being done right now in Minnesota in regard to these issues that you are talking about. So the way that a scenario that you're talking about, and there is a whole spectrum of scenarios that you've sort of introduced into the conversation here, and they're different, but this doesn't change, this bill doesn't change the way that things are being done now. So, thank you.
Senator Croom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I don't want to introduce a whole slew of scenarios, so why don't I try to narrow it down to one? A 13-year-old goes in to have an abortion and then makes a spur-of-the-moment decision to be sterilized so she doesn't have to go through it again. Would that be a fundamental right in that scenario?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. Respectfully, Senator, that's not the way that type of care works. That's just not how it's done. And I would urge perhaps some consultation with some OBGYNs, some medical professionals who could walk you through how a decision like that would be worked through and a decision made about whether treatment that would involve sterilization or could result in sterilization might be administered. It's a very serious medical decision. Someone doesn't just walk in and have that sort of treatment, especially at 13. So I advise talking with some medical professions about their standard of care in that regard. Thank you.
Senator Croom.
Mr. Chair, my question is not, I'm not asking about how it's typically done. I'm asking whether that 13-year-old would have a fundamental right under this bill.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. Senator, thank you for the discussion. The hypothetical patient that you're postulating about here would have a right to not have the government interfere with the discussion that individual is having with their health care providers and the decision-making that they need to make in consultation with them. So again, what the bill does is keep us out of that. It keeps politicians, it keeps the state out of those decision-making processes to come into these very personal reproductive health care decisions that people are making and to say One size fits all. We think we know what's best for you under this situation. They're making that decision in consultation with medical providers who are also doing their best to provide care within their standard of practice.
Any further discussion? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sen McCune, you've made references to existing law and practice. I want to go back to the question that I asked earlier. When is a baby endowed with legal rights? Now, we've kind of, in your bill, you've kind of created a line, blurry as it is, that somehow an individual, an unborn child, I'm assuming, does not have rights to individual health care because it's dependent on the mother's intentions. But what happens in a botched abortion? What happens when the baby survives that abortion? Does that baby have individual health care rights guaranteed by the state of Minnesota?
Senator McEwen.
Oh, and one other thing.
Senator Limmer.
Or does your bill continue to put the decision and the authority in the mother's hands, even though the baby would survive the abortion?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Chair Latz. Respectfully, Senator, I am loath to entertain these false arguments, these false premise. Infanticide is illegal, and this bill does not change that. And I would like to stay within the realm of what is serious, real questions here. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator McEwen, I'm going to caution you not to disparage the motive or intent of members of the committee that are asking questions. Senator Limmer.
Mr. Chairman, Senator McCune, you may not know this, but according to the Minnesota Department of Health, 5 babies were aborted who lived just last year. So those things do happen. And in your bill, you're creating a circumstance that the intention of the mother will govern whether or not that abortion should be successful. If the abortion was not successful, who makes the decisions on behalf of the child? Is it the original intent of the mother? Can she abort that child after it is born despite the attempt on an abortion? That's guaranteed under your bill? Or the moment that child is born, does it now have the protection of making its own, or a guardian making its own individual health care decisions? Is it protected? Is that life protected? We talk about glowing terms about, the right to life and pursuit of happiness. Somehow it kind of dissolves during debates like this. So tell me, does a baby who survives an abortion, will it enjoy the protection of its very life if that occurred? And we know it's happened. The Department of Health has already reported it.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Limmer, as I said, infanticide is already illegal. This bill doesn't change that. And frankly, the 5 abortions that you cited to happen for various reasons and are not, in fact, due to botched abortions or abortions gone wrong. As we know, and I think this is important for me to say, because this is a hurtful line of argument for many people. Abortions that take place at the end of pregnancy are extremely rare. Less than 1% of abortions. Oftentimes, they happen under heart-wrenching, heartbreaking circumstances where people have to make extremely difficult decisions about their health. They're often expecting children, sometimes have picked out names, have bought cribs and toys and clothes, and are devastated to learn that this is the course of action that they now find themselves having to take. So the idea that Minnesotans are somehow willy-nilly just having abortions and that we have to step in to stop them is frankly insulting. It's not true. It's not based in medical fact. And again, what you're describing is infanticide. It is illegal, and this bill doesn't change that.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I know you're trying to stray us off the subject on whether or not a baby has rights. Maybe I can ask a series of questions that maybe you could answer. If a baby survived an abortion, who has the legal authority to act on the baby's behalf at that point? Or is the medical facility now required to give that baby who survives an abortion health care, immediate health care? Is there some kind of imaginary line that a baby crosses anywhere in the state, guaranteed by the state, that it will be guaranteed all of the medical care that anyone else might be if they were in danger and injured and wounded? Yeah, it's an emotional issue, but it's an emotional issue on both sides of this issue. When I think of the process of an abortion, that can trigger a lot of emotions too. So you're not allowed to have a monopoly on emotion on this argument because it goes everywhere. And we're just trying to figure out the path in Minnesota. Like I said before, I wish contraception would be more widely used. It seems to be everywhere if people would use it. But nevertheless, until America, as one of our past Surgeon Generals, Coop, said, until America deals with the whole concept of contraception, abortion will never end. And I don't know if your bill gives me any comfort. It actually, I think, especially with the words that say, but not limited to, I think it opens the gate wide open for this and not only other things that maybe we haven't even imagined. Senator Howe brought that up. Technology is changing. Are we going to conceive children in an artificial womb? Who has the right to declare that life end when it's in that type of setting? I don't even know if a baby that would survive an abortion, are they given a birth certificate recognizing the humanity of that birth? I don't know, but I kind of think not, unless the baby continues to live outside the womb. And then in that case, would it actually even receive a death certificate? I don't even think we give that individual, as small as it is, the dignity of even recognizing its life by this state. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, there's a big gap. The big gap is this. I don't think your bill recognizes the legal rights of an unborn child. I think unborn children deserve legal rights. I think one can make the argument. Some can start it at conception, others can start at viability. 80% of those polled in this country have been said that they would recognize that legal right of protection in the third trimester. 80% polled. Your bill, I think, maybe you can correct me, does this guarantee a person the right under this law to abort their child mere minutes before an actual birth?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Senator Latz. And, I would state that these are important topics overall that we're talking about, but the way that abortion care is being provided or is being characterized by your comments, Senator, it's just simply not how reproductive health care works, not how pregnancy works, not how abortion care works. And I encourage some communication perhaps with some professionals, some OBGYN doctors who can explain how this does happen, rarely, and when it does, what this actually is like. Abortion doesn't happen at the end of pregnancy, and stillbirth is a different topic. So, and again, infanticide is illegal. And this doesn't change that. So I appreciate what feels to me like a sincere moral concern about how this happens and whether it's okay the way that it happens. It's difficult. It is. But I, again, would like to refocus us on what this bill does, and that is to establish the fundamental right of an individual to make autonomous decisions about their reproductive health care. It doesn't change that infanticide is illegal. It doesn't change any of that. So the way that care is being given now by OBGYNs and professionals working with people who are at the end of a pregnancy, it doesn't change that.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By your comments, Senator McEwen, I'm thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, do you agree that a third trimester abortion is equal to infanticide?
Senator McEwen.
No, I do not.
Thank you.
Senator Cruin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to direct your attention to line 112 in the definition section.
So Senator, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I meant to say before I recognized you, we have about 10 minutes left.
We got it. Okay.
Just so.
This is a quick one.
Okay, no, I'm not trying to cut you off.
Yeah.
Just so if there's anyone else who's going to want to comment or participate in the debate, we want to make sure that opportunity is available. So
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
for everyone to understand our time frame here. Senator Cruin.
Directing you to line 112, the term abortion care. Does this bill have a definition for abortion care?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The bill does not have an elaboration on what the term abortion care means.
Senator Cruin.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Is it your intent, as the author of this bill, for abortion care to mean something different than abortion, as I believe is defined in another part of our statute, or do you mean this to be synonymous with that definition?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator, for the question. I believe what we mean by the term abortion care is the recognition that abortion is a part of reproductive health care, an important part. And so using the term abortion care is a recognition of that it is part of people's reproductive healthcare decisions and their choices. And so, yeah.
Senator Croon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess, I'm looking at a court, maybe looking back and deciding what that might mean. And we have a definition of abortion in statute right now. And it seems to me that it would just be good law to keep a consistent definition of that term rather than introducing a new term called abortion care, which could lead to ambiguity about what we're even talking about here. So it's more of a comment than a question, but thank you.
Is there any further discussion on Senate File Number 1? There will be a roll call. Any concluding comments as the chief author, Senator McEwen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In conclusion, I want to thank all of you. Thank you to the committee today for considering this bill and for having this discussion in a difficult one. I appreciate very much having heard from all of you and also from all of the testifiers, and I thank you for the opportunity to present this bill. I respectfully ask for your support of Senate File 1.
Senator Westland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move Senate File 1 be recommended to pass.
And be referred to the Senate floor?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Senator Westland moves that Senate File 1 be recommended to pass and be referred to the Senate floor. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Latz,
Yes.
Senator Umu Verbatim,
Yes.
Senator Limmer,
No.
Senator Carlson,
Yes.
Senator Eichhorn,
No.
Senator Howe,
Nay.
Senator Croon,
No.
Senator Pappas,
Yes.
Senator Seeberger,
Yes.
Senator Westland.
Yes.
There being 6 ayes and 4 noes, the motion prevails. The bill is referred to the Senate floor. There being no further business to come before the Judiciary Committee today, we are adjourned.